Hello and welcome back to the Public Eye Podcast, a 6-part series of podcasts brought to you by Granite Exchange. I'm your host, Sarah Travers, and today we are continuing our discussions with local Newry entrepreneurs and business owners to learn more about how these companies have come to be and gain an insight into their growth. So remember to keep an eye out on your favourite podcast app and subscribe to stay up to date with future episodes. Well, today I am delighted to be joined by Clare Vallely, Managing Director of Kukoon Rugs. Clare, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. Glad to be here.
So before we begin, I'm going to tell people a little bit about Kukoon Rugs if they don't know. But when it comes to the rug trade, County Armagh siblings, Clare and her brother Paul, have it covered. Having watched their father sell rugs at market stalls, the pair embarked on a homespun business venture selling clearance lines on eBay. A previous attempt to flog ornaments, gifts and toys had proved futile. But surprisingly for the brother and sister team, the rugs had the magic touch. And after gathering up enough money to travel to Belgium, Paul and Clare made contacts with factories and started ordering directly. So they bought their first container in 2007 of clearance rugs for €35,000, £28,000 sterling, selling them on to satisfied customers. So satisfied, in fact, that within 6 months, they had made £70,000, with half of the lines still in the container. So the siblings started out from a shed adjacent to their parents' house in Newry. In 2014, they opened their first retail store at Carnbane Industrial Estate in Newry. And in 2017, they opened their second store at Boucher Crescent in Belfast. They were roughly shipping now around 300,000 rugs across the world, although these numbers look set to be much higher because online during the pandemic, people have been really wanting to turn their homes into their palaces, and they have been purchasing all sorts of furnishings, and thankfully rugs have been selling like hotcakes. They currently have 40 employees with 7 new starts on the books recently and more jobs to come. So what a success story. And who knew, Clare, that rugs would be where you would make your fortune? So just take us back a little bit. What was your father gave you the idea about selling rugs?
Indirectly, Sarah, yes, it was. As you mentioned, we had started out selling ornaments and giftware, and the original idea for online actually came from a trip to London with an uncle of ours. We went to see a football match, and he had seen this online selling course. I think it was how to sell on eBay, and had asked if we would like to go along to it, and we said of course. And at that point I was I think I was in first year in college studying to be a chartered surveyor, and Paul had just finished his degree in Queen's in business management and had returned from a year in Canada. So we hadn't any real solid plans for what we were going to do. And after we'd went to that eBay course, we were intrigued by this world of online selling. And we'd come from a background of going to markets with our dad for years. And we knew that was a pretty tough life and probably not something we were overly keen to continue on with. And we decided we'd try to sell some giftware and ornaments that actually came from a shop that our parents had in the early 90s. It was stock that was left over, and it did sell for us, but we had no future with it because we couldn't buy it anywhere. It was stock that was 10 years old at that point. And then we decided we wanted to continue with online sales. We just needed to find the product. Rugs, initially we were like, nobody's going to buy these online. You need to go into a shop and feel them and see them in person. But we decided that we'd give it a go, and our dad very kindly gave us a couple of the rugs that he just couldn't sell in the market. So they wouldn't have been the most ideal items at the time, but to our surprise and delight, they sold, no problem at all.
Unbelievable. And then take us back to 2007 then. So you had to find €35,000, which I'm sure when you were starting out was a heck of a lot of money. But it totally paid off. How did you raise the funds in the first place?
Well, we had been selling rugs that we were buying locally from wholesalers for about 6 months prior to that, and that was working fine for us, but there was probably too many people involved in the process that were trying to get a profit, and we knew that if we could go direct to source, we'd end up with the product that we wanted. We'd be able to sell it at a cheaper price to the customer, and ultimately there'd be more profit in it for us. And we didn't really know how to do it. We'd actually went to a trade show in Germany in the January, and we were very naive. We had went there, we got onto the stands, were asking us for business cards, and we hadn't even thought about business cards, never mind actually had them printed in with us. So our naivety shone through, and we'd actually met a couple of the local wholesalers we had been buying from, and they were telling us scare stories about how it was a minimum orders of 5, 6, 40-foot containers from manufacturers. That's all they would entertain. And I think we left the show a bit disheartened and thinking, no, we can't afford any of that. We don't know how to do it. And we plodded on for a few months, still buying stock from the local wholesalers and then selling that on, and we gathered basically every penny we could through that. And the container we ended up buying, as I said, was a clearance container, so it was going relatively cheap, and I think they'd give us relatively good payment terms as well, which is unusual for that time. They didn't know us, but we had a few months maybe to pay that back, and luckily the product sold very well.
And where are you selling these rugs? Where was the custom coming from?
At that time it was eBay. So that's the only platform we had for sales. Now I think from memory our dad maybe had taken a few of them to the market, but he couldn't really sell them. They weren't a product suitable to the local market here.
Isn't that strange? Because you would think with a rug it would be a tactile thing, a purchase of a rug, you want to go and see it and touch it or whatever, but no.
Yeah. And I think it's become even more prominent now that people trust the online systems. And probably back then it was lack of choice. People were buying online because they maybe didn't have good local retail stores, or they just didn't know, they couldn't find what they were looking for. And to be fair, most of our customers were in England, and I think they were much more used to online shopping back in 2006. The idea here was still very novel, and we didn't sell very much here at all. It was mostly to England.
I mean, it was so fortuitous of you to have gone on that course as well about learning how to sell on eBay, because back in 2007, a lot of us wouldn't have had a clue. And now, look, especially because of COVID and the pandemic, everybody is suddenly having to learn how to sell online or put their goods, whether they had a shop or they have products and they had to sell online. So you're kind of way ahead of the curve here.
And I think that was it for us. We were early adopters, unbeknownst to us. I can't claim that we had a great business idea and we always wanted to sell rugs online. It happened very organically, and I think both myself and Paul knew that we wanted to work for ourselves. We wanted that flexibility and freedom. We came from a retail background. Our parents had always sold things essentially in one way or another, and that's what we understood. We knew how to please customers and we knew how to stock products. The two really came together and aligned naturally at the right time for us, and we were very lucky. I was 19, Paul was only 23, so we had no financial commitments, we had no mortgages, we had no children. The world was our oyster really, so we could take those risks that I think are probably a lot more challenging for people when they're having to leave an established career or they have a lot of responsibilities at home. It was a different path for us, but we worked hard at it and we continue to work hard. I would like to say it's got a lot easier, but it's got a lot harder, I think. The competition's got more fierce, and it's great to see so many people coming online, but obviously that presents challenges for us as well.
So talk us through what happened then. So you've had this incredible first sale of the clearance lines. You've now got 40 employees. What happened between then and now? How did you get to that stage? Who was the first person that you took on?
The first person we took on was somebody to help us with dispatch, really, and I think that was in late 2008. And it's something myself and Paul would have said quite often since then. We left it too long.
To take on the first employee?
Yeah, it was. We were in the front line essentially, and we were probably hiding out there a wee bit in terms of we were doing all of the packing and answering the customer emails and the messages, and we were buying the rugs and getting them delivered ourselves. We were doing everything, and we probably weren't really looking strategically at the growth of the business or how we were going to scale this up. The first person we took on was somebody to help with dispatch, and I think probably our first 5 or 6 staff members were all in and around dispatch roles and warehousing roles, and that really allowed me and Paul then to take a step back and focus more on product and sales channels and how we could scale the whole business up.
And how did you get the advice to know how to scale up? Because a lot of startup businesses, they have the idea, but it's really that business knowledge that they lack, especially when you want to grow. What did you do?
I think a lot of it came from trial and error. Now, we did attend a lot of local business conferences and Invest NI talks and things like that, but a lot of it came from making mistakes and trying different products and different channels and just feeling our way through it. We made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I would say probably talking to other businesses. Unfortunately for us at that time, there weren't too many businesses in similar areas in terms of e-commerce. We would have been among the first, certainly in the local area, but there were a couple of other contacts that we had from different areas in Northern Ireland, and we would have formed maybe chat groups or email groups, and we would have stayed in contact with each other and just sort of talked about experiences with couriers and how you went about importing products in, exporting products out, and building that knowledge up. And actually, it's still much the same today. So while there are a lot more organisations out there to help e-commerce businesses, a lot of our genuine information that we use come from other businesses and having good contacts.
And the other employees that you've taken on now too, I suppose you were telling me before we came on air that you've actually taken on 7 extra members of staff during the pandemic because business has been so good. The company has just grown and is still growing.
Yeah, it's very exciting times for us overall. Again, we've expanded the warehouse roles. We have a lot more people working in dispatch and just processing the increased volume through the business. But we also have a couple of new roles along the lines of social marketing and sales creation roles as well, which is an exciting one for us. So we have somebody now working entirely on our social media accounts and are working directly with influencers, which probably in truth is well beyond mine and Paul's expertise, but we can see the direct impact it's having on the business already. And we've been working hard for the last couple of years to really build a brand, and that brand's quite well known locally, but trying to get that brand message out across wider markets. And about 30% of our entire turnover comes from outside of the UK and Ireland. So we're still learning about how we get that brand message out there throughout Europe and through the US as well. And for us, ultimately, it's social media. So a lot of the job creation roles have been around that. But
it's also very important to have a great culture. And I think you're being very modest here, Claire, because I believe that Kukoon are very much known as a company who look after their people. That's really important to you.
It is, Sarah, definitely. That has been the fundamental of our business success, has been the teams of people around us right throughout the business. It's something we're very passionate about. We've passed up maybe key employees in the past who would have been fantastic in a role, but they weren't really a culture fit with the company. And we have thought long and hard about those decisions, but ultimately decided the strength of our team is one of our USPs. And we have a great team of problem solvers. You know, everybody is passionate about the company and passionate about their job roles. And a couple of years ago, we actually adopted what would be known in the manufacturing industry more so as lean principles. We prefer to consider it as continuous improvement, where we try to give employees a bit of time every day. COVID has changed it somewhat because we have a lot of people working from home now, but prior to COVID it had been up to an hour a day to make improvements in their own job roles, and we're quite open about financing that and giving people the freedom to do what they want to improve.
Why is that so important to you?
I think that's how you survive. You know, things, as we've seen in the last 6 months, change so rapidly, and once a business gets to a certain stage, it becomes beyond your control. If almost, you know, you can't be a touch point on every decision in the business, and the only way is to have a team of people around you who feel empowered to make their own decisions and to do the right thing for the company. And as long as they feel genuinely invested in and that you care about them and that you're trying for everybody to grow together in the business, well then we have found it takes a lot of time and financial investment to get that far. And for a lot of companies, it's too big of a step. You know, they can't give an hour a day over for employees to improve processes. You know, they need them working every hour of the day. nor are they willing to maybe put the financial investment in to see people make mistakes or do things wrong. But the longer tail of it, we have found that people become problem solvers. If something goes wrong, they'll look for a fix. They'll look for a way around it. They look for a way to improve it. And that has meant that we've seen dramatically increased volumes, say, during lockdown. And instead of everybody just panicking and not being able to cope with it, immediately we had people going, right, how are we going to cope with this? What are we going to do? What systems can we put in place? And I think that's come from several years of this continuous improvement mentality within the company, where we just don't accept, right, that doesn't work. The process takes too long. Like, there's no...
Or it's not like a command and control mentality. You are not micromanaging. You have allowed people to progress through this personal investment, so they do find solutions for you, which is ultimately fantastic. But how much more difficult is it to manage your staff remotely? I mean, what were your feelings at the start of lockdown when it came to, goodness, how, because I heard you were doing all sorts of crazy, fun, lovely things for your team all the time. So give us an example of some of the way it was before lockdown, and then how things have changed to managing remotely.
Well, every day prior to lockdown, we would have had a 30-minute company meeting in the morning, and that normally would have involved team games and quizzes, and it was up, whoever was taking the meeting, it was up to them what they'd done. And a lot of that now, obviously, we have to have socially distanced version of that. We can't get in a huddle for quizzes and all. So plus a third of our staff at any one time are working from home. So we just don't have that touch point every day. And I think that's been quite problematic to get around, because the company culture is so important to us. And every year we would have went away for a vision day. So we would have had team building events, and we would have went say the laser gun quests, or just team building, just different areas. We went Castle Ward and Kilbroney and a lot of local adventure centres, and we just haven't been able to do that this year. So we have been quite worried about the impact that will have on the company culture whenever we're not in that daily contact and that social contact. But we have tried to maintain it through remote quizzes, and we still have a daily Zoom meeting every day, which has helped foster it. But it's not the same as having the in-touch communication, and we definitely are feeling some of the negative effects from that.
And is that for the employees or for you? Is it harder to be, in control of a company when your employees are all over the place?
No, I think I feared at the start that it probably would have been, and that's something we initially thought, like, how are we going to manage everybody and how are we going to keep everybody up to speed with what they should be doing. But as I said to you, because it's a team of problem solvers and the continuous improvement, everybody adopted different systems to help that along. So a lot of the systems we maybe had that were in person, or they were on whiteboards, or they were in different locations within the business, we took them online, and we enabled people to have their workloads sort of specified in different online channels. And then with Zoom calls and Skype calls, we have the ability to stay in contact for different meetings. So we've managed to work around it.
Have there been any pluses? I've been talking to a lot of people during this time, and there have definitely been opportunities and new ways to work that have been beneficial.
There certainly has. I think we have a few people who are maybe commuting longer distances to work with us, and for them, probably personally, not having to do that commute has been very rewarding. So there's maybe been a renewal of energy, I would say. It took people maybe a couple of months to get used to it and get their heads around how do we do this exactly. But I think people are recommitted now. They're hoping in the future that this can become part of their working life. And in order to make that work, they're trying to find the best systems to produce the best results. So in a way, it's nearly been self-policing, because I think people have understood if this is going to stay in place over a longer period of time, we have to find ways to make it work.
Now, you were before, around the start of lockdown, shipping 300,000 rugs. Was that a year annually?
Yeah, annually.
What do you think those figures could be now?
It's hard to tell, and whether they'll remain increased or not. I would say we could be looking at 50-60% increases. We'll have to see what Q4 brings, but it's looking quite promising. The online retail environment has exploded in the last couple of months, and I think maybe where people were spending money on foreign holidays and summer clothes for holidays, we're not traditionally very good at saving money, so I think that expenditure in a lot of cases will go on home improvements and Christmas decorations inevitably. So we'd be hoping for a very strong Q4, and tentatively we think those growth levels will continue. There's now a whole bank of people shopping online, especially for things like rugs, who just weren't before. You know, they were predominantly in-store shoppers. They've now seen that actually this can work. You can buy online. If you're not happy with it, you can return it. Pictures and videos and descriptions now are so advanced that people seem to have got a lot more confidence. So we would be hopeful that going forward the growth we've seen will continue.
And do you ever pinch yourself at where you've come? Because I know at the start of the interview there you said that, you know, you'd started out, you were going to be a surveyor. And now, you know, you're the co-founder of this hugely successful company. Do you ever think, how did this happen?
Quite a lot, actually. Yeah, we have a lot to thank our parents for. Both our mum and dad's been inspirational and a massive part of our success. And unfortunately, our dad passed away a couple of years ago from cancer, so he's not with us to really enjoy the success we're seeing now. But he would have been very proud of us. But he was also a realist and very, very capable of offering criticism where needed. But that always kept our feet on the ground, I think. The same with her mum. She is an accountant and she's had a lot of experience over the years working with different businesses, and she's always able to tell us about businesses she's seen in the past who have done very well and maybe made a couple of wrong decisions and have seen the business maybe fall back a bit over a few years. So we do remind ourselves often that we're only as good as the decisions that we make right now in the present. And well, we don't take it for granted. Like, we are very proud of the business that we've built and the people that we have working in the business, and we have big plans for growth for the future. But I suppose it is hard to believe it's come this far. Like, I think when we started, we didn't truly believe ourselves that we were going to make it in rugs. I think we hoped that we'd be able to do something, but I don't know if we really believed it would be the success that it's turned out to be. I think going into second year in college, I had wanted to quit. I wanted to completely leave college and focus full time on the business, but my mum and dad weren't overly keen on that idea. So I would suggest that they probably didn't fully believe either that we could make a real go of it. And I did stay on in college, and I'm very glad that I did. But I know our mum would say it quite often, like it's unreal sort of to look at the business that we have now, and the premises that we have in Newry and all were unimaginable to us in the first few years of the business when it was just a shed beside our home.
Unbelievable. And family is hugely important to you, obviously. And I know, I mean, I'm very sorry to hear about your dad, but I know that you're very close to your mum still, and look after and appreciate everything that she's done to help you and Paul get to where you are in your lives. I have to ask, what is it like running a business with your brother? I'm thinking I have one sister, and I don't know whether we could actually manage to run a business together. What's that like?
It's overall very enjoyable, but it definitely has its challenges. There's no doubt about that. I think a lot of people probably wonder about sibling relationships and could they do it with their own brother or sister. Myself and Paul were always very close. There was only the two of us growing up, and we come from a very rural area, so as children we would have played together a lot. And I think, unbeknownst to us, obviously, it was in those formative years we were learning how to work together and make decisions together and fall out plenty but make it up and get on with things, because there weren't other siblings to play with, or you just had to get on with each other. And we're quite different people, but we do work together well, and we bring different skill sets to the table.
So tell us, what way are you, and then what way is Paul? What do you both bring? What's different?
I suppose Paul would be quite good on the operational side of the business. He's very, very good at seeing, potential areas for improvements or money saving, or how we can do things faster, how we can do things better. My skill set would be maybe more on the sales side of it or on the product side of it. So looking at what new rugs we can bring in, or what new sales channels are available to us. In terms of our personalities, Paul would be very, very good, I suppose, at the front of the business as the speaker for the business. I would usually prefer in the back seat, although not this time. No. But I suppose it's that different personality as well that helps us in the company. I think people will come to us for different things or with different questions, and I think most of the people that work with us are very appreciative of our different personalities. If it was just one of us leading the company, I think it would probably be a very different company and not for the better.
Now, you've also become a mum yourself over the last year to twin boys. And I always hate this. You know, people say, oh, why do you always ask women how do they balance, you know, children and business? And why would you never ask a man that? I actually would and I will. But, you know, how do you cope? How has becoming a mum and running a business, how has that been for you?
Challenging, definitely. Wasn't the easiest start for the boys. They came 9 weeks early, so they spent a couple of months in the NICU. Wow. And again, this is where the great thing is with running a business with your brother, and then the fantastic team of people that we have around us allowed me to pretty much step out of the business for those couple of months and focus entirely on the boys, and then come back to the business stronger than ever. It's the same challenges, I think, as it is for everybody else. You're sort of, you know, you're looking at childcare and feeling guilty that you're not spending enough time with them, feeling guilty you're not spending enough time with work. And what I'm told, that doesn't ever get better. That continues through the course of your working life and with your children. But it's a balancing act. And for me, this is one of the big benefits of working for yourself, and why, no matter what the challenges of being self-employed are, the flexibility that it offers you is invaluable. Like, I know that you have to commit a lot of time. It's still 50, 60 hours a week at times when it's needed. But I know ultimately that if I want to be able to take a half day to go to something or be with the child for something, I'm going to have that option in the future. And I think that's probably how I reconcile having to maybe go back to work very quick, or not having the kind of maternity leave that you would like to have. But I certainly wouldn't complain about it. You know, it's again, actually working from home in some ways has been nice, because I have been able to spend a wee bit more time, and you're not running to the creche to pick them up and drop them off and things like that. So that's been quite enjoyable, but it definitely has been challenging.
And how important is self-care to you? Do you get any time to yourself at all, Claire?
No. No, there's definitely
in a word.
Yeah, there's no other answer to that. No, I don't really, I suppose, find time to myself very important at the minute, and I know in time I will, but I suppose life's just so hectic at the minute. Like, we've experienced such growth within the business, and the boys just recently turned 1, so home life is very busy as well, and I think I've just accepted that there isn't going to be time for myself for a few years yet, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But I do think it's important to take a bit of time out. I love my exercise, I love running, and when I did go to the gym, I enjoyed that as well. That's taken a bit of a back seat, unfortunately, at the minute as well. But for me, I suppose that's my time out, and my self-care is just making sure that I get my exercise in every day, and it's a bit of an escape from work and babies as well.
So you can't beat a run, and it's free, and if you have a pair of trainers, you can always get out for 20 minutes and clear the head. Now, the purpose, Claire, of this podcast is to inspire existing business owners and ambitious entrepreneurs like yourself to grow their business by, I suppose, offering insight into the success of local Newry companies like your own. But what advice would you give to anyone out there listening that perhaps maybe has a business idea like you had all those years ago, but they don't know where to start?
Just get stuck in, try something. There's so many opportunities out there at the moment in terms of places to sell your product. People out there willing to support business ideas between Invest NI and Intertrade Ireland, that if you really don't know where to even start, they're great places to go to for advice. In terms of if it's a product that you have to sell, cost of setting up your own website and all, it can be quite onerous, but there are other channels out there between eBay and Amazon, Etsy, not in the high street. There's a lot of places with already custom made audiences sitting there, and they're open to everybody. You just need to go and investigate it and get started. I think there's a saying we say here quite often, which I find quite infuriating, which is, if it's for you, it won't go past you. And I think that nearly absolves people of their own self-responsibility and going after their goals, when and the truth is that if it will go past you. Like, if you don't go out there and take a stab at it, or if you have something in mind you'd like to do, or a dream or a business you'd like to start, if you try it and it fails, you aren't going to be any worse off than you are today, and you won't have that nagging doubt about, well, what if, and there is no better time. I think people constantly say, well, maybe next year, or we're coming into a recession, or there's a pandemic, or this is the perfect time to start to do something different. Everything's in some kind of upheaval, and the entire retail world, as we know, it's changing daily. And I think now, particularly if it's a product that you have in mind, it's the perfect time to start selling, to start trying online. I think another few years, the markets will be completely swamped and it'll be a lot harder then. So why not now?
What do you think was the biggest risk that you ever took?
Probably moving the business to Newry was a big one for us. Like, we were coming from a shed beside our own home with very small running costs, essentially. We didn't have rent to pay. We just had the running costs of the building, essentially. And it wasn't a necessity at the time, but we really looked at it and said, we can't stay here. Like, we were in a very rural area and we couldn't attract maybe the most skilled employees that we needed. They didn't want to come and work in an area like that. They couldn't in a lot of cases. The premises that we were in was capped by the size that it was, so we knew growth inevitably was going to be a challenge for us. And I think at that time we just had to make the decision to go for it. You know, it was a decision based very much on where we wanted the business to be rather than where the business was at that stage. And it would have been a lot easier for us to not take that risk, stay where we were, not have increased costs, not have that challenge of covering those costs. But we knew if we wanted that business to grow, if we wanted to attract the best employees, if we wanted to get the best courier services, it was a move we needed to make. And it was costly, and there was a couple of years after it where there was no profit in the business, and myself and Paul, we didn't have any take-home wage. You know, we were living on pretty much nothing, or just whatever we had saved up at that time. But I'm very glad we took it. It was one of the things that really propelled the business on.
And one of the buzzwords that we hear in business so much now, especially currently, is resilience. Now, I don't know what resilience actually means, but you strike me as a very resilient person. But you've taken those risks and they've paid off. But have there ever been times that you felt extremely challenged? And, you know, how did your resilience get you through? Or would you say you're a resilient person?
Yeah, I think probably both myself and Paul are very resilient. We've had to be over the years. The first couple of years in the business in particular were challenging. We were definitely, as standard, we're working 80 hours, 100 hours a week. The social life was non-existent, and keeping in mind the ages we were at the time, I think that in itself was a challenge, but a very enjoyable one. Probably the most challenging times we've had have been in more recent years, say, where maybe growth in the company wasn't where we wanted and needed it to be, to really thrive as a company. And we have had to look at, say, cost-cutting measures or just difficult decisions that we didn't have to make. But ultimately, when we looked at the survivability of the company, there were decisions that we did make. And I don't doubt that those times will come again. You know, business doesn't tend to, in our experience, get easier. It possibly gets harder with every year that passes to continue to grow and to remain competitive. And I think if you get too scared, if you get too sort of battered down by the wrong decisions that you've made and the costs that those have had to incur, it can make you fearful of taking risks in the future. But the only way to grow as a business is to take those risks that other people just aren't willing to. And we have made, as we would say to our employees all the time, nobody in there can make as many mistakes as me and Paul have made. And we're still here, we're still going. So we'll continue to make mistakes, we'll continue to learn from them, and hopefully we'll continue to grow.
So being self-employed, you would never change that? You would never change running your own business? You could never go and work for anyone else?
No.
Not a word.
Not at this stage, no. It's not to say that it's always easy. There's definitely weeks and at times in the past months where it's been too challenging, where, you know, it has been too hard, where maybe sales have fallen way back and we just don't know what to do, or maybe we've had problems in the past, say, with the building that we've been in, which have been quite challenging, or the odd employee issue that have been particularly confronting. But I think once you are self-employed, once you go down that route where you get to make your own decisions and sort of be the author of your own destiny, really, for good and for bad, you can't go back from that. And I think me and Paul would say probably quite often we're unemployable at this stage, so we'd better make this work.
What's next then for Kukoon Rugs? I mean, you've got a store at Carnbane Industrial Estate in Newry. You've also got the second store in Belfast on Boucher Crescent. Do you see the actual physical premises still being as important in the future, or do you think you'll go completely online?
No, the physical stores will still form part of the future for, well, unless the market determines different essentially. But we've actually come back to the stores reopening in June, and they're stronger than ever, which was a surprise to all of us. We had expected maybe a bit of a downturn in sales just with people being scared to go out, and we haven't seen that. I think the challenge for physical retail going forward, it's as real for us as it is for all businesses. It's surviving the sort of rocky road ahead. You know, customers are changing, and with every new generation coming along, they're just more savvy with online right across their life. And I think we have to be realistic and say retail stores are going to change. You know, we can't keep going on the way we are. I think rents will have to decrease, rates will have to decrease. I think the government will have to step in and look to protect the survival of retail stores. For us, there's still a significant enough number of people who do want to come in store. All of our staff, both in our Belfast and Newry store, they're interior experts. It's not just the rugs that they know about interior design and colour palettes, and they love helping customers put a look together. And for some people, we'll never get that online. You just can't achieve that service. And for some people, that's invaluable. And while that continues to be the case, I think there will be a place for retail stores, but I think customer service will have to improve dramatically across the board.
Clare Vallely, thank you so much for joining us on our podcast. It's been a real pleasure to find out more about Kukoon Rugs and indeed about you. So join me for the next episode where I will be meeting Celine Grant from Regen. Have a great day.